Thomas Reed tried to hide his yawn. The Galactic Assembly meeting had gone on for 5 hours already. He sat in the human section, surrounded by the grand circular chamber that housed over 200 alien species. Most of them had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, while humans had only joined the assembly 30 years ago. Reed looked around at the strange faces. Some had scales, others had fur. Some had 4 eyes, others had none. But they all shared one thing. They looked down on humans as newcomers, as primitives who barely knew how to travel between stars. At the center of the chamber stood Speaker Velox, leader of the Narvik Empire. He was tall and thin with gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His voice boomed through the room as he spoke about protective oversight of the Lumari system. Reed frowned. He had seen this before. The Narvik Empire would find a smaller, weaker species with valuable resources. They would create problems, offer help, and then take control. In the past 10 years, they had taken over 12 different star systems this way. Today, they wanted the Lumari system, rich in rare minerals that powered starships. The Lumari people clearly need our guidance, Velox said smoothly. Their economy is failing. Their defenses are weak. We offer only to protect them until they can stand on their own. Reed watched as Ambassador Pell of the Lumari approached the speaking platform. Pell was small with blue skin and large sad eyes. His voice shook as he spoke. My people do not want Narvik oversight, Pell said. We have managed our affairs for centuries. Yes, we face challenges, but we wish to solve them ourselves. Please, honored assembly, respect our independence. Many delegates nodded, but Reed knew it wouldn't matter. The powerful always found ways to take from the weak. They used fancy words like oversight and protection instead of conquest, but the result was the same. Reed thought of Earth's history. Humans knew this pattern well. They had been both the conquerors and the conquered. They understood how the strong could use rules and procedures as weapons. We will now vote on Resolution 7729, regarding Narvik oversight of the Lumari system, announced the Assembly moderator, a 4-armed being with glowing eyes. Reed felt something stir inside him. The Assembly was meant to prevent war and promote peace among the stars, but instead it had become a tool for empire building. The Narvik Empire never needed to fire a shot. They simply used the Assembly's own rules to get what they wanted. As voting began, Reed made a decision. He pressed the button on his desk that requested speaking time. The moderator looked surprised. The Assembly recognizes Ambassador Thomas Reed of Earth. The chamber fell silent as Reed stood. This was unusual. Voting was rarely interrupted. Reed walked slowly to the central platform. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. Velox wore a small smirk, probably expecting another meaningless human protest. As Reed took his place at the platform, he looked across the vast chamber. Some delegates looked curious, others annoyed. The Lumari ambassador looked at him with a mix of hope and confusion. Reed took a deep breath. What he was about to say would change everything. Earth had discussed this possibility for years, had prepared for it in secret, but now the moment had come, and it was up to Reed to speak the words that would shock the galaxy. His mind was clear, his purpose certain. The time for polite diplomacy had ended. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice steady and firm. Honored delegates of the Galactic Assembly, he began, I must speak before this vote continues. What happens here today will determine the course of galactic history. The vast chamber of the Galactic Assembly fell silent as Thomas Reed stood at the central podium, every eye, tentacle, and sensing organ from 200 alien species focused on the human diplomat. Speaker Velox of the Narvik Empire crossed his long gray arms. His face showed a mix of annoyance and amusement. Humans rarely spoke during important votes, and when they did, most delegates ignored them. Reed straightened his back and looked directly at Velox. The people of Earth have watched these proceedings with growing concern. Reed began, his voice clear and strong. We see a pattern that is all too familiar to us. In our history, we called it imperialism. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Reed touched a control on the podium, and large screens around the room lit up with images and data. In the past 10 years, the Narvik Empire has taken control of 12 independent systems. Reed continued, always using the same method. First, economic pressure. Then, security concerns. Finally, a vote in this assembly for protective oversight. The screens showed planets before and after Narvik control. Mines stripped of resources. Local populations moved to cramped cities. Narvik military bases spreading across once free worlds. What you call oversight, we call conquest, Reed said. The only difference is you use this assembly's rules instead of weapons. Volok stood up. This is outrageous. The human clearly doesn't understand galactic politics. Their species has barely left their home system. They know nothing of the complexities. We understand perfectly, Reed cut in. His voice grew stronger. Humans have been both the colonizers and the colonized in our history. We have committed the sins we now see before us. We have also suffered under them. And we have learned that there are moments when diplomacy fails, when words become meaningless. He paused, looking around the chamber. The Lumari ambassador, Pell, watched with wide eyes. This is such a moment, Reed said. The chamber grew tense. No one interrupted now. For years, Earth has tried to work within this assembly. We have submitted proposals. We have raised concerns. We have asked for investigations. And each time, the Narvik Empire and its allies have blocked us. Reed's eyes narrowed as he looked at Velox. Today we draw a line. Earth will no longer stand by while free peoples are swallowed by empire. Reed placed both hands on the podium and leaned forward. His next words came out slow and deliberate. If the Assembly votes to approve Narvik oversight of the Lumari system, Earth and its allies will consider it an act of aggression against free peoples everywhere. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Reed raised his voice to be heard over them. Let me be absolutely clear. We're going to war. Chaos broke out. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting and gesturing. Some rushed to communication devices to contact their governments. Others stood frozen in shock. War had not been declared between spacefaring civilizations for 700 years. The assembly itself had been created to prevent such things. Volox laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the noise. You threaten the Narvik Empire with war. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are basic. You would be crushed within days. Reed did not flinch. Perhaps. But ask yourself this, Speaker Velox. Why would we make such a threat if we did not believe we could win? That silenced Velox. A hint of doubt crossed his face. The moderator banged a glowing staff on the floor. This session is suspended. The vote is postponed until further notice. Reed stepped away from the podium. As he walked back to his seat, many delegates moved away from him, as if war itself was a disease they might catch. Others watched him with new interest, even respect. Ambassador Pell of the Lumari approached him with tears in his large eyes. No one has ever stood for us like this, he whispered. But the price your people may pay. Reed nodded grimly. Freedom always has a price. Humans understand that better than most. As Reed sat down, his communication device lit up with urgent messages from Earth. The die was cast. The galaxy would never be the same. The Earth Embassy was buzzing with activity. Staff members rushed back and forth, sending messages to Earth and human colonies. Security teams checked and rechecked the building's defenses. In the center of this storm stood Thomas Reed, calmly reading reports on his datapad. You've started a war we can't win, said a voice behind him. Reed turned to see his deputy, Dr. Ellis North. North was younger than Reed, with dark hair and worried eyes. He held his own datapad showing Narvik military strength. Their fleet is 10 times bigger than ours, North continued. Their technology is 100 years ahead of ours. Every military expert says we don't stand a chance. Reed smiled slightly. Then it's a good thing I don't plan to fight the war those experts expect. He led North into a small, secure room where they could talk freely. As the door sealed shut, Reed placed a device on the table that created a field blocking all listening technology. "We've been preparing for this moment for 5 years," Reed said. "Earth didn't join the Galactic Assembly just to make friends. We joined to learn." Reed touched his data pad, and a 3D map of the galaxy appeared above the table. Certain systems glowed bright. While the Narvik Empire was busy conquering worlds, we were building relationships. These 12 systems, Reed pointed to several points of light, have resistance movements against Narvik rule. We've been secretly supplying them with weapons and training. North's eyes widened. That's against assembly rules. So is conquering worlds through legal tricks. Reed replied. The difference is, we didn't get caught. Reed showed more points on the map. These systems are officially neutral, but they fear they'll be next on the Narvik list. They've agreed to supply us in secret. But even with help, their ships and weapons are still better than ours, North said. Reed's face turned serious. That's what they think. The truth is, humans never stopped developing weapons technology. While other species focused on energy shields and plasma cannons, we kept working on things they consider primitive. Kinetic weapons, electronic warfare, chemical propellants. They think our technology is simple because we only showed them what we wanted them to see, Reed added. North sat down heavily. You've been planning for war all along. I've been planning to prevent one, Reed corrected, but I also planned for what would happen if we failed. Outside the embassy, the news was spreading across the galaxy. Humans, the newcomers, had threatened war against the mighty Narvik Empire. Most aliens laughed at the idea. A few wondered if humans knew something they didn't. In the Narvik embassy, Speaker Velox was not laughing. He sat with his top advisors, watching recordings of human history. These creatures fought 3 planet-wide wars before they even reached space, said one advisor. They are savages. Primitive savages, added another. Their ships would break apart if they faced our fleet. Velox watched footage of human battles, his expression growing darker. Perhaps, but they would not threaten us without reason. He pointed to images of human fighters hiding among civilians, using the land to trap larger forces, and employing surprise attacks against stronger enemies. They do not fight like civilized beings, Velox said quietly. They fight to win, at any cost. Meanwhile, on 12 worlds under Narvik control, secret meetings were taking place. Resistance leaders listened to messages from Earth. For the first time in years, they felt something new, hope. And on the Lumari homeworld, Ambassador Pell addressed his people. For centuries, we have avoided conflict. We have trusted in diplomacy. Today, a species younger than our oldest trees has offered to fight for our freedom. Pell looked up at the stars. The galaxy is changing. War is coming, and we must decide where we stand. Across the galaxy, species began to choose sides. Most expected humanity's quick defeat, but a few remembered old stories about the danger of cornering a wounded animal. Humans had nothing to lose, and that made them the most dangerous species of all. The War Council room on Earth was simple but impressive. A large round table sat in the center, surrounded by screens showing maps of the galaxy. Around the table sat the 12 most powerful people on Earth, military leaders, scientists, and government officials. Admiral Diane Porter stood at the head of the table. She was tall with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. For 20 years, she had built Earth's space fleet in secret. Operation Prometheus is ready, she announced. We've been preparing for this day since we first joined the assembly. She touched a control, and a hologram appeared above the table showing hundreds of ships. The Narvik Empire has 500 battle cruisers, 2,000 attack ships, and 50 planet destroyers, she said. We have 50 battle cruisers, 200 attack ships, and no planet destroyers. One of the council members frowned. Those aren't good numbers, Admiral. Porter smiled. No, they're not. If we fight them directly, we'll lose. So we won't fight them directly. The hologram changed to show different kinds of ships, smaller, faster vessels with unusual designs. The Narviks expect us to fight like they do. Big ships, head-on battles, energy weapons against energy shields, Porter explained. But humans have always been good at fighting in ways our enemies don't expect. She outlined the plan. Earth ships would avoid direct battles. They would attack supply lines, communication centers, and undefended bases. They would hit fast and disappear before the Narvik fleet could respond. We call this asymmetric warfare, Porter said. We use our strengths against their weaknesses. What strengths? Asked another council member. They're better than us in every way. Not every way, Porter replied. She pressed another button, and the hologram showed a strange device. This is the blackout box. When activated, it disrupts quantum communications for 10 minutes. The Narvik military depends on instant communication. Without it, their ships can't coordinate. The council looked impressed. And we have another advantage, Porter added. The Narviks have been at peace for 700 years. Their soldiers have never faced real combat. Our military still trains for actual war. Meanwhile, in a different part of the Earth base, Ambassador Reed met with representatives from the 12 conquered systems. They gathered in a secure room, their faces showing both hope and fear. The resistance on your worlds must be ready to act when the time comes, Reed told them. We can't win this war alone. My people have forgotten how to fight, said one alien with blue skin and 4 arms. We've been under Narvik control for a generation. My people remember, said another, her scales glinting in the light. But we have few weapons. Reed nodded. Earth will provide weapons and training. When the fighting starts, the Narvik Empire will have to defend itself on many fronts, not just against Earth. And if we lose, asked a small, furry representative, the Narviks will destroy our worlds in revenge. Reed's face turned serious. That's why we can't lose. In another meeting room, Earth scientists showed their newest inventions to military leaders. Unlike the energy weapons other species used, Earth had developed railguns that fired metal projectiles at incredible speeds. They had created computer viruses that could infiltrate Narvik systems. They had built ships designed to be nearly invisible to Narvik sensors. They think we're primitive, said one scientist, because we still used physical weapons instead of energy beams. But sometimes old methods work better than new ones. Across Earth and its colonies, factories worked day and night building ships and weapons. Soldiers trained for space combat. Everyone prepared for what was coming. In the Lumari system, Ambassador Pell watched as Earth ships arrived to protect his world. The Lumari people provided fuel, minerals, and safe places for human ships to hide. Other species watched and waited. Most expected humanity to fail. A few began to wonder if the young species from Earth might actually win. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the first shot of a war no one had seen coming. 3 weeks after Reed's declaration, a Narvik battle group entered the Ta Ceti system, home to one of Earth's largest colonies. 20 massive Narvik ships moved toward the 4th planet, their weapons ready. General Zun commanded the Narvik fleet from his flagship, the Unstoppable. He was a decorated officer with 200 years of service. He had never lost a battle, though he had never really fought one either. No one challenged the Narvik Empire directly. Scan for human defenses, Zun ordered. His crew worked quickly. We detect 15 human ships near the planet, General. Small vessels, lightly armed. Zun smiled. This would be easy. Send them our demands. Full surrender or we destroy their colony. The message went out. Minutes later, the human ships began to move away from the planet. They're running, laughed one of Zun's officers. Zun narrowed his eyes. Follow them. Don't let them escape. The human ships fled toward a large asteroid field. They moved fast but seemed disorganized. The Narvik fleet pursued, confident in their superior speed and shields. As the human ships entered the asteroid field, they suddenly split up, going in different directions. "Stay together," Zun commanded his fleet. "Focus on the largest human ship." The Narvik vessels followed the biggest human ship deeper into the field. Zun noticed something odd about the asteroids. Some seemed to be moving in strange ways. "General, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from some of the asteroids," reported a sensor officer. Before Zun could respond, hundreds of the asteroids suddenly activated engines. They weren't rocks at all, but disguised mines. They rushed toward the Narvik ships from all directions. "Shields up," Zun shouted. Evasive maneuvers. The Narvik ships raised their energy shields, but they were designed to stop energy weapons from the front, not physical objects from all sides. The mines slammed into the ships, causing massive damage. At the same time, smaller human vessels appeared from hiding places inside real asteroids. They moved quickly between the Narvik ships, attaching strange devices to their hulls. "What are they doing?" Zun demanded. His answer came seconds later when the devices activated. They weren't bombs, but EMP weapons that sent powerful electric surges through the Narvik ships, shutting down their systems. Within minutes, 3 of Zun's largest ships, including the Unstoppable, drifted powerless. The human vessels quickly gathered their wounded and disappeared deeper into the asteroid field before Narvik reinforcements could arrive. At the same time, across Narvik space, communication relays began to fail. The quantum network that allowed instant communication between Narvik worlds went silent. Military commanders couldn't coordinate. Fleets couldn't receive orders. And on 12 conquered worlds, the people rose up. Resistance fighters who had hidden for years suddenly appeared with advanced weapons provided by Earth. They attacked Narvik bases and freed political prisoners. On the Narvik homeworld, Speaker Velox received the news with growing alarm. How could this happen? He demanded of his advisors. How could primitive humans cause so much damage so quickly? "They're fighting like savages," said his military chief. "They don't follow the rules of war. They hide. They trick us. They attack our weakest points instead of facing us directly." "And the rebellions?" Velox asked. "How are they coordinated?" "We don't know. Our communications are compromised. We can't contact half our fleet. We're fighting dozens of small battles across our territory instead of one big one against Earth." Velox pounded his fist on the table. "Find a way to stop them. I want Earth destroyed for this humiliation." Back on Earth, Admiral Porter received reports of the first battles. There were victories and losses. Human ships had been destroyed. Colonies were under attack. But the Narvik Empire was off balance, fighting a kind of war they hadn't prepared for. "It's working," Porter told the War Council. "They expected us to fight conventionally and lose quickly. Instead, we're fighting like humans always have when facing a stronger enemy." "And how is that?" asked a council member. Porter's face turned grim. "We fight dirty. We fight to win." 6 months into the war, the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity held its ground. The Narvik Empire had lost 1/3 of its fleet. 8 of the 12 conquered systems had successful rebellions. The mighty empire was now fighting on many fronts. But Earth paid a heavy price. 3 colonies had been destroyed. Millions of humans had died. The Narvik forces still had more ships and better technology. Admiral Porter looked tired as she addressed the War Council. "We're hurting them, but they're hurting us too. We can't keep this up forever." Maps showed Narvik forces regrouping. They had adapted to human tactics, becoming more cautious. They no longer chased small groups of human ships. They protected their supply lines better. They had developed countermeasures against the blackout box that disrupted their communications. "They're learning," Porter said grimly. "And they still outnumber us." In his office, Ambassador Reed received troubling news. Narvik scientists had created a new device that could track human ships through hyperspace. Earth vessels could no longer hit and run so easily. "We need something big," Reed told his team. "Something to end this war before we lose everything." On the Narvik homeworld, Speaker Velox had lost patience. His position was in danger as more Narvik citizens questioned the war. Some powerful families had lost sons and daughters in battle. Others saw their wealth decrease as trade routes were disrupted. "Enough games," Velox told his war council. "We will attack Earth itself, not just their colonies, but their home planet." The Narviks gathered their largest fleet ever, over 300 ships, including 5 planet destroyers. They planned to bypass human defenses using a new technology that could hide their approach. Earth's long-range sensors detected unusual activity, but couldn't identify what was happening. Something big was coming, but they didn't know what or when. Reed sat alone in his office when the emergency alert sounded. The Narvik Armada had appeared in Earth's solar system, having bypassed all outer defenses. They would reach Earth in hours. Earth's remaining ships rushed to defend their home planet, but they were outnumbered 5-1. This was the direct battle they had avoided for 6 months. Now they had no choice. As the Narvik fleet approached Earth, Reed called an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders. "We have one last option," he said. "One final plan we hoped we wouldn't need." The plan was dangerous and desperate. Thousands of tiny spacecraft, each barely big enough for one person, had been built in secret. Unlike warships, these small vessels carried no weapons. Instead, they held sophisticated broadcasting equipment. 5,000 human volunteers prepared to pilot these small ships on what might be a one-way mission. As the Narvik fleet came within striking distance of Earth, the planet's defenses fired with everything they had. The battle was fierce but one-sided. Earth's ships fought bravely, but were quickly overwhelmed. Speaker Velox watched from his command ship with satisfaction. "Prepare the planet destroyers. Let's end this war today." Suddenly, alarms sounded across the Narvik fleet. Thousands of small objects were approaching from Earth. "They're too small to be weapons," reported a confused Narvik officer. "They're just small ships with single pilots." Velox laughed. "A suicide attack. How primitive. Destroy them." But the small ships were fast and hard to hit. They surrounded the Narvik fleet, getting close to each vessel. Instead of attacking, they began broadcasting. Every screen on every Narvik ship suddenly showed the same images, secret recordings of Speaker Velox and his inner circle. The broadcast showed Velox talking about sacrificing Narvik soldiers to maintain his political power. They revealed how he had started the war to distract from corruption at home. They showed proof that he had hidden the true cost of the war from his own people. Most devastating of all, they showed Velox's secret deals with other empires, selling access to resources from conquered worlds, including those of his own allies. The broadcast went not just to the military ships, but directly to the Narvik homeworld and every Narvik colony. For the first time, the Narvik people saw the truth about their leader. On ship after ship, Narvik crews looked at their commanders with new eyes. The tide of war had turned again. Chaos spread through the Narvik fleet as the broadcasts continued. On ship after ship, crew members turned against their commanders. Some captains ordered retreat. Others locked themselves in command rooms as their crews rebelled. On the Narvik flagship, armed guards surrounded Speaker Velox, but they weren't protecting him. They were arresting him. "This is treason," Velox shouted as they took him away. "I am your leader." "Not anymore," said General Tark, the second highest ranking Narvik. He had seen the broadcasts. He had lost his own son in what he now knew was an unnecessary war. "The High Council has removed you from power. The fleet is standing down." Within hours, the massive Narvik Armada began to withdraw from Earth. The planet destroyers, which could have ended human civilization, turned away without firing a shot. 2 days later, General Tark sent a message to Earth requesting peace talks. The war that had cost millions of lives was ending not with a final battle, but with the truth. 1 week later, Ambassador Reed once again stood at the central podium of the Galactic Assembly. The chamber was packed. Representatives from every species watched in silence. No one had expected humans to defeat the Narvik Empire. No one had expected the war to end this way. General Tark, now leading the new Narvik government, stood opposite Reed. Between them lay a document, the peace treaty. The Narvik Empire agrees to withdraw from all conquered systems, Reed announced. Each world will be free to govern itself again. Many delegates expected harsh terms from Earth. They expected humans to demand territory, resources, or control of the Narvik military. That's what any other victor would have done. Instead, Reed surprised them all. Earth does not seek to replace one empire with another, he said clearly. We fought this war for one reason: the freedom of all people to choose their own path. We have no interest in ruling others. The treaty called for a new galactic charter to replace the old assembly rules. The new charter would specifically ban the kind of economic and political pressure the Narvik Empire had used to conquer worlds. It would give smaller species more voice in galactic decisions. This war could have been avoided, Reed said, if the assembly had done its job and protected the weak from the strong. No blood would have been shed. We must build something better, something that truly serves all species. As Reed and Tark signed the treaty, the chamber erupted in applause. Even former Narvik allies seemed relieved that a new era was beginning. After the ceremony, an elder representative from one of the liberated worlds approached Reed. The elder was small and frail, with skin like ancient paper. His people had been under Narvik control for generations. We feared you humans when you first joined the assembly, the elder said. Your history is filled with war and violence. We thought you would bring chaos to the stars. Reed nodded. Humans did have a bloody history. We never imagined, the elder continued, that you would use your warrior nature to bring peace. You understand war better than most, and that is why you fought to end it. Reed smiled. That is the paradox of humanity. We know the cost of violence because we have paid it so many times. We fight not because we love war, but because we value peace enough to defend it. As they spoke, representatives from many species gathered around, eager to establish relations with Earth. The humans, once dismissed as primitives, were now seen as wise protectors. The Galactic Assembly, once a tool for empire building, became the foundation for a more just community of worlds, all because one human diplomat had been willing to say the words no one had dared speak for 700 years. We're going to war. And in doing so, he had created a lasting peace.